probably the hardest thing to do is lead your peers. Not yell at your peers, like some people think that's leadership. I mean, that's needed sometimes, but actually leading your peers and, trying to peer into their soul and get them to do something greater. And that was a lot of fun.
Welcome to Long Blue Leadership, presented by the U.S. Air Force Academy Association and Foundation. Your host for this edition of Long Blue Leadership is Naviere Walkewicz, USAFA class of '99, currently serving the Association of Graduates as Senior Vice President of Alumni Relations and as a member of the AOG Board of Directors. And now, Naviere Walkewicz.
My guest today is Mr. Karl Falk, USAFA class 98, founder and CEO of the Colorado-based tech startup BotDoc, husband to April and father of 3, one whom is a current Air Force Academy cadet in the class of 27. Karl transitioned out of the Air Force in 2004 and into the emerging technology consulting space, going on after that, in his own words, to use his extensive industry experience in going against the grain, to find innovative and industry disruptive ways to move encrypted data, leaving no trail or trace. He is so successful that he has become a nationally known and sought-after speaker on innovation, entrepreneurship, and efficiency. He has been formally recognized for his work by presidents and peers alike. We'll talk with Karl about his life before and during his days at the Academy, challenges he faced along the way, leadership lessons he learned, and we'll ask him whether he believes boldness like his makes great leaders, or if leaders need to be bold to be great. Welcome to Long Blue Leadership.
Hey, all right. Thanks for having me. This is great.
I'm so excited. I think some of the greatest things about these podcasts is we're really learning more about our graduates and some of the paths that they've walked. We share a path right now. We both have boys at the Academy.
Yes, former preppies, now 4-degree and on the football team.
That's right. That's right. So it's interesting, though, while we were at the Academy at the same time, we really didn't cross our paths then. So I think that's the beauty of once you graduate, the long blue line really is enduring. Well, today we're going to learn more about your journey and your path, and we'd love to start just with a little bit of who Karl is. Take us back in the day. Tell us about where you grew up, your family.
Yeah, well, I see. So I grew up, back then I had to say a small rice farming community on the west side of Houston, Katy, but now Katy's, almost 1 million people. It's a large extension of Houston, so everyone knows where Katy is. But it was me and my mom. She was a, single mom teacher at the time. Actually, she drove buses at first and then transitioned into teaching. And, I look back at those times and I didn't know how lean it was. Right. And, but I think, I didn't have things when I was a kid. I owe a lot to my mom that she worked. Sometimes she had 4 jobs. Her and I cleaned the local community center for extra money. She drove, like I said, she drove buses for the school district, and she was actually the trainer. Actually, there's a really funny story. So my mom, even my kids, they look at me when they first heard this story and they started laughing. So she was part of they had this like national bus rodeo. And I'm like, bus rodeo? No, so she would drive it through like an obstacle course and have to back up. And no, so I know this sounds really funny, but so she was, because she would train all the bus drivers for Katy ISD. And we would go around Texas at these national regional championships and stuff. But it was kind of funny. It was a bus rodeo and driving a bus through an obstacle course. She had to like get out and run around the bus and like hit the tires with hammer. It was pretty funny. So
wow, what an amazing woman. I mean, it sounds like you got some leadership lessons right from the get-go at home.
Yeah. I learned what it was like in tough times, and my mom's going to kill me for telling these stories, but even after soccer games or we would all go to Mr. Gaddy's Pizza. I think it was Godfather's Pizza. I think it was Godfather's Pizza. And my mom would say, hey, just get the water, right? And I would sit and watch the other kids play the games. And I was enthralled, but, looking back, it kind of makes me sad, but I didn't really care back then. And, so it doesn't really matter where you start.
I mean, you probably have some of those thoughts even now as a parent, and we'll get into some of that, when you think about how you pave ways for your families from your own upbringing. So what were you like as a kid? I mean, you obviously were very loved and you were involved in a lot of things. Were you in mostly sports?
Yeah, it was funny. I wasn't in sports really until junior high. And well, soccer growing up. Of course, I was the fat kid that was picking flowers, right? So I mean, I know my wife; she's gonna shake her head because she knows this story. And but it wasn't really until junior high, and I remember I didn't play football. That was the first time I played football. Was 8th grade, and a couple of the guys I knew said, "Hey, you should come out for football." I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know," and they're like, "Yeah, come out for football." So I went for football, and then sure enough, I was good at it. So, and then the football coaches were like, "Hey, you should throw, shot put, and discus and track," and then ended up doing really well in high school and shot put, discus. So you kind of never know. That's where I say you never know where your path's going, and why not at least try it, right? Because you never know. And I've told that to our kids: try every sport. You just never know what's going to stick. And if you don't like something, then okay, great. At least you know, right? Yeah, but. I'm an Eagle Scout, so I was in Scouts during that time frame. So it was sports and Scouts and causing havoc in Katy, Texas, and in the late 80s, cow tipping and doing other stuff like that.
What are some of the things you learned about yourself kind of in those formative years, even maybe on the verge of leadership? Did you know you were going to go to the Air Force Academy? How did that kind of happen?
I didn't. I didn't know I was going to go to the Academy. I knew... all I knew is when I got into high school in football, I was good at it. And, being in Texas, there's more spotlight on football. And I had some very good coaches. My head football coach in high school, Coach Bubba Fife. Everyone in Katy knows Bubba Fife. And even to this day, he's still involved in the school district. But he was a big advocate for me with coaches that came by. And there's some stuff I didn't find out until later in life where, back then it wasn't common for the school to provide shoes. And, some guys had their own pads and stuff like that. And I remember my mom years later telling me that that actually Coach Fife came to her with money and said, this is get him some shoes. Sorry, that got to me a little bit more than I thought it was going to be. But, so I guess what I can say is there's been a lot of people. I'm where I'm today because of a lot of people throughout my entire life, and I have a lot to be grateful for. But I was very fortunate to have those coaches in my life because there was actually a time. This is actually a crazy story. There was a time where I was in. I was the big fat tuba player too. So I was I kind of did everything because I enjoyed it. But there was a point where I kind of had to make a decision because I was actually the guy that was playing football and then marching band and football, and that's really tough to do. And I had made up in my mind that I was going to quit football, and because I didn't have a dad around, and my mom wasn't really into sports, like I am and my kids are now. And I made up my mind, so I went to talk to one of the coaches, Coach Schubert, and I told him, I said I'm going to quit football, and I'm going to be in the band. And he looked at me. He goes, "No," and he said, "We'll do anything." He's like, "We'll work out the schedule or whatever we want to keep playing." And I actually had written a letter. I think it was part of one of my classes at the academy about that. And I later on gave that to him, but told him that day was a fundamental shift in my life because I don't believe I would have been here. Obviously I came to the academy for what the academy is, but it was sports that introduced me to the academy that got me to apply and got me here. So, I'm sure I would have been okay if my life worked out a different way, but I definitely would not be, I don't believe I'd be at the academy unless that day he just looked at me and said, no.
He said no.
No.
There you go. Sometimes the no was a different door that opened.
Yes. Yeah.
That's great. So, Okay, so you were recruited for football? Is that accurate to say?
Yes.
Okay, and so you came in by way of the prep school.
I did. I was a preppy, so C Squad. But yeah, lots of fond memories of the prep school. That's for everyone who's been through there knows that it's a special place. And then actually seeing our boys there last year brought back a lot of memories. And what's crazy is there's Chef Jeff at the P is still there, still serving up food, still asking if you want fries with that. So yeah, but no, so that was really a cool experience last year. Being able to a lot of memories, a lot of flashbacks.
Just great stories of how you got to the academy, just the experiences, I'm sure, not just the leadership from your coaches and really helping to guide you, but let's talk about some of your experiences with some of the cadet candidates or the preppies and what that translated, how that kind of shaped you in that transition.
Even the cadets that weren't at the prep school know that there's a special bond with everybody at the P. And, I think coming into your freshman, your 4-degree year at the academy, you already know 200 people. And that's a great feeling. I mean, that first day, I-Day, is much different if you're a preppy than not. So, but yeah, I think obviously the prep school really helped me transition into the academy and, I think set me up in a better place my freshman year.
In your cadet years, you played football. What were you studying?
So I was a management major. It was a really struggle for me that I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I think that was, I guess that's good and bad. Now, people know, hey, I want to be this doctor. I want to go into physical therapy, or I want to, be I love math and I want to go off and do those things, or I want to go off into aerospace engineering. I had no clue. I really didn't. For me, it was, I wanted something that was broad enough. Statistics was actually a class, looking back, I enjoyed it, one of my few A's at the academy, but it was because we had this Navy officer who came in and taught it, and it was all around investments because he had a lot of investments, and so we structured around that. So I think it was the applicability of it in my mind that was enjoyable.
Is that like the first seed and kind of what maybe you're thinking about in the future?
Maybe.
You think?
Yeah, I think it was, something around that, and I think part of it was because growing up I didn't have much, and I think I wanted to have a different life than that, and especially with eventually someday having a family and kids. So maybe that's why it was of interest. But the other class too, that again, one of my few A's, was a negotiation class. And it was only for that one semester, but they brought an individual from Harvard to teach the class, and I think he did some kind of negotiations for the government, like with other countries and stuff. And he built this whole class at Harvard, and he came in and taught it, and it was a lot of fun.
Well, that makes sense into all the success you've had, where how it started with a statistics class, and then how to negotiate as a boss. Let's go back to football a little bit. I think, we're really interested to understand what it's like on the field, some of the highs and lows, and some leadership lessons you took away from that.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, one of the great situations I had was obviously having Fisher DeBerry as the coach, right? Very dynamic person. Some of the sayings that came out of his mouth had us shaking our heads sometimes, but obviously an incredible man, and I think that inspired a lot of us. But if I think back, probably my most memorable moment was it was November of '96. It was my junior year, and we went to South Bend, and Notre Dame was 8th in the nation. It was Lou Holtz's to-be last season, and we beat them in overtime. And what a special feeling, right? And I remember we were out celebrating on the field. I think it was Dustin Tyner. I think that's who it was. One of the receivers jumped up on me, and we were celebrating, and it got snagged as AP Photo of the Week. One of the photographers took it. So it was in Sports Illustrated that week. It was in every major newspaper. So that was, I say that was my 15 minutes of fame. But
questionable. I think you had a lot more fame. We'll get into later.
We'll see. Different. But that was a special season, but there were some big highs and big lows. And I think I learned a lot from this season personally, because we did not win the Commander-in-Chief's trophy that year. I think we lost to both Army and Navy, which didn't happen in the 90s. And we beat Notre Dame, who's in the top 10, right? So there's this huge roller coaster. So we had the talent. And it was us, that our class of 98, we sat down and a lot of us just said, we don't want it to be this way because we have the talent. We want to go out on a bang. And then our senior season, we went 10-3, had a less than optimal performance against Oregon in the Las Vegas Bowl, but a 10-3 season, and obviously won the Commander-in-Chief's trophy that year, and got to do the Forrest Gump through the Oval Office with Clinton, so that was fun. But I'll be honest with you, I learned a lot. I would say I learned more about leadership and who I was. And honestly, probably the hardest thing to do, especially when you're that age, is lead your peers. Not yell at your peers, like some people think that's leadership in the locker room, but that's needed sometimes. But actually leading your peers and trying to peer into their soul and get them to do something greater, and that was a lot of fun. I mean, I still have great relationships with those guys, and absolutely love that season. A lot of memories, and I think it came down to us deciding as a team that we wanted something different.
What did you learn about yourself in that moment? When you had such a strong, performance of a season, and then to lose against Army and Navy.
I learned that I didn't want that to happen again. In fact, the Army game this year, when Air Force came over to sing, we were on that side of the stadium, and I took a picture of it, and I sent it to my son, and I said, "Remember this," because when that season, that's what motivated me. That next season was I didn't want that to happen again, and it meant something. And I think it meant something to me too, because I knew, and Coach DeBerry would talk about this all the time, there were guys out in the Air Force deployed who would watch that game, who were in the Air Force, who were betting, with their Navy and Army brethren. But that game meant something to those guys. And for me and the guys on that team, that's what was important. And that's something you don't get at other schools, right? And I think that helped me understand from the angle of leadership, if we're kind of going on that theme, was how do you instill that feeling in somebody? Because then they'll run through a brick wall for you. And that's much different than again, sometimes you have to be the yeller and the external motivator. But if you can get inside of somebody and make them feel something, man, that's when magical stuff can happen. And I feel like that's what happened my senior year, and I think that bled over into the next class, that next season, your year where they won the WAC championship and did really great. So.
Oh, that is a great story, and I'm really thankful you shared that, because I think it tells us a little bit more about who you are, especially going into the service after graduation. You separated in 2004. Let's talk about your time in the service.
Yeah. So it's weird. There's some consistent themes with me in the military, and part of me wishes I had stayed in longer. I just did 6 years, and part of it was at the time we were stationed back. My last station, we were stationed back here in Colorado at Schriever, and I probably could have worked maybe a PCA over to Peterson for a year, but then we knew we were gonna have to move. And my wife's a native of Colorado, so at the time she was pregnant with Alec. And she looked at me and she goes, "I don't know about you, but I'm staying." And I was like, okay, I guess I'm getting out of the military. But, there's part of me wish I would have stayed in. But, there was kind of this really cool theme with me. My first assignment, I stayed on and coached football at the prep school. And I mean, man, that was so much fun. We had a really good time. Back then, they had, I think there was 8 or 9 of us, lieutenants that were down there. So you can imagine, that was a fun time. But went out to Wright-Patterson, and so I was a finance officer and was doing acquisition out at Wright-Pat. And at the time, they had this financial competition called Top Dollar. And so I tell my kids, I said, yeah, I was like Tom Cruise, because it was Top Dollar, Top Gun. And I always roll their eyes like, Dad, you're stupid. But Top Dollar started because of Desert Storm. Way back when they realized that, hey, when we go to a new location where there's nothing, we really need CE, finance, and contracting there first, because we have to pay for stuff, get stuff rolling, in money, infrastructure before you start bringing a lot of troops over. So they realized they were very bad at that. So the Air Force started Top Dollar to kind of create this deployed situation to train our financial staff and contracting staff on how to do it better. So lo and behold, I get to Wright-Pat, and they didn't know where to put me yet. So I was on the AS&C staff, and they didn't have a dispersing officer for the team. So it was 5 financial people and 2 contracting. And they said, well, hey, there's this kid who was a football player. So, maybe he can lead this crew. Because you had to do obstacle courses. I mean, it was crazy. It was like over the top. Some of the stuff you had to have the chem suits on, and you hear
literally physical.
No, it was physical. It was we were in a tent. We had to give people cash out. I had to balance out every night. I had a safe that we had to open. No, it was legit. And then we had to put on like the chem suits, and I still was like balancing out for the day. And I'm like, it was over the top. So anyway, I get thrown into this competition, and I felt like I was in, football season, because we had, we would meet at like 5 a.m. up at the gym, and we'd go running, and we'd do all this stuff. And we were together during parts of the week when we can get off from our job and everything. And so we ended up going up to Alpena, Michigan, and winning the AFMC, Air Force Material Command competition. And then we go to the Air Force competition, and we ended up winning. So we were the best team in the Air Force for deployment, and this is just before 9/11.
And this is also under your leadership.
Yeah, I was the team lead for it, and so it was pretty cool. And so I technically wasn't Tom Cruise. I would have been Val Kilmer, right? Because I won. So anyway, but they haven't called me back, right? Like the new movie. So, but that was the story, especially as the new Maverick came out. I'm like, hey, I was Top Dollar, and of course my kids are rolling their eyes, but it's a cool story.
That is a great story.
Yeah. So a lot of fun memories there. And then, was my next spot was out to Schriever. So 50th Space Wing, on the budget side. And then we stood up a financial services office out there. So I was technically the first FISO out at Schriever. But what's funny, there's this weird theme, both at Wright-Patterson and also when I was at Schriever. I kind of realized that there were certain processes that could be automated a little bit. So Wright-Patterson didn't know anything about really building databases, but structured a database for one of the teams I was on to kind of track things we were doing. And then when I went to Schriever, I worked with one of our tech guys that we had in the office, and we built this software to track year-end closeout to make it a little easier to close out the books. And so looking back, that's funny because that's what I've ultimately done with our business. So I think for whatever reason that resonates with me, to try and make things a little bit easier, reduce friction in processes, and just make a lot of things easier.
Well, I was just going to ask how that started. So it sounds like that kind of was the impetus of it. So can you tell us more about BotDoc?
So in essence, what we're doing is we inadvertently invented something that was pretty unique. We were building something totally different. We had an impossible requirement set to do security with a very challenged customer who wouldn't log in, put in PINs, passwords, wouldn't download apps, worked off of free Wi-Fi at Panera or McDonald's on their phone and do security and encryption in that environment. It's impossible. Well, we figured out a way to do it. And at the time, it was just part of the tech stack that we were providing to our clients. And they came back and said, hey, you know that thing you did? It works. Can you make it a separate product? Because we always have one-off requests or whatever. And I remember sitting back in my chair and going, that's it. So we did it. We gave it to the clients that we had at the time. And they said, hey, so they came back and said, hey, can we get more accounts? And they said, oh, by the way, what do you call it? And we're like, I don't know. Like, we didn't have a name for it. So
the thing that works.
Yeah, the thing that works. So it was kind of a really cool moment because we ended up pivoting the entire company just to focus on that little piece of technology.
What year was that?
So this was late 16 going into 17. So we didn't really have much. I didn't even have a way to charge for it at the time. And we actually had customers of ours using it with other companies, and they were coming to them saying, hey, what is that? And they said, we don't know, call these people. So we were getting calls from other companies saying, hey, can we get it? And then I'm like, all right, what did we do? Right? We did something really cool, because it wasn't just specific to the industry we were working in originally. It was kind of all over the place. And it was really the need for moving things across the internet very easily, kind of like shipping. That's why some of our clients call us the secure FedEx of data, because we're in the business of just picking things up and dropping them off. And when we drop them off, we get rid of it. So we're not a long-term storage, but we keep all the tracking information. So we know where things are, how long, when they were picked up, when they dropped off. And we kind of become this isolated environment outside of a secure platform that can transport things in and out of it without external parties needing access to the system. So it's a unique concept, and it's turned the eyes of many major Fortune 500 companies that use our tech now, and we're growing in different industries.
The fact that it was discovered because of a challenge and an impossible
requirement,
and yet you proved that it wasn't impossible. And so can we spend a little time, I think, in that space? At that time, you were doing some consulting, or were you already kind of in this entrepreneurial space?
So I call it entrepreneur light. So when I got out of the military, I went to work for Booz Allen. Their premise is you are an entrepreneur, but this with the support of a large company. And I kind of got the itch there, but I realized that I needed to be doing it for me, or I was going to end up dead, divorced, or both. So I transitioned out. I was pulling double duty for a little bit, but transitioned out. I actually got into real estate at the time because I knew I wanted to do something different. And that was during the crash, and it was good timing for us because we were getting into real estate at the time. And without going into a lot of detail, we basically took that, what April and I were able to amass during that time period and invested into going into software.
Was that something that you felt really confident in? Was it a bit scary? I think some of our listeners, really sometimes they're on this precipice of, do I take the leap or do I not? What's in me? What does that look like? And so maybe if you could share some of your lessons of, what was that path for you?
Oh, wow. The podcast is free to listen to, right? Yes. All right. So here's the deal. So you're getting free advice, so it's worth what you paid for it. So I'll at least caveat that. But I'll say this, some people go out and buy a franchise. That is entrepreneurship, right? Because you're taking your money, whether it's a McDonald's, a Christian Brothers Automotive, like Mike Tyler, who's a 99 guy, that's right. And that's phenomenal, right? Because they still have to run a team. They have to make some really hard decisions, make sure that the numbers work and whatsoever. And some of them grow into multiple sites. So that's a level of entrepreneurship. Sometimes just investing your money in a startup is somewhat of an because you're taking that risk. But I think there's a very hard type of entrepreneurship as well, and all of it's hard, is having an idea that's, some people say on the back of a paper, a napkin, and saying, I'm going to do this because that's great and that's awesome. And sometimes you just have to be able to take one step. You kind of know what the future looks like, but if you try and plan it all out, it's not going to work like that. And I think that's where some people get in trouble, because they'll say, hey, I'm going to do this, and they'll plan it all out, and they'll say, that's the steps I have to take. The problem is it never works out that way. So you have to be able to make decisions on the fly. So I'll give an academy analogy here. I remember it was the assault course when I was a freshman, and it was going through the dang tunnel with the helmet and getting to the end where there's that little hole. And I remember I was trying, I'm a big guy, right? So I was trying to squeeze in through there, and I got that weird moment where I was a little freaking out a little bit, and I went back and I just threw my helmet off out of the hole. And of course, then, like, all right, game on, right? Extra attention. You never lose your helmet, blah, blah, blah. And I remember this. They covered the hole up. So there was literally covered the hole up with dirt. And I remember that freaked me out. But I'm like, I'm not going back, right? Like, I'm not going to be that one. And it did. I was just like, all right, just take one push at a time, dig out the hole first. And I just had to focus on that one task, because when I started to think about all of it, it was like freaking me out. So I guess entrepreneur is kind of like that. Like, you can have a plan, but sometimes you just got to make that decision in front of you. And I think it's the fear aspect too. The one piece of advice I got from an individual, he said, when you feel fear, take a step. It's easy to take a step, and that's all you got to do. And I think throughout the years, it's always been taking the step. Sometimes you just got to say, I can't think about what the next couple of years look like. I got to make a decision right now, and let's just take one step and figure it out.
We've learned a lot kind of through your journey. You certainly never been one to shy away from, a little bit of grit, right? I think that's something you've brought to the table in everything that we've heard so far, Karl. Well, I feel like the theme today has really been about, a lot of your successes have always been around, being part of something bigger than yourself. When the listeners are on and they're getting to know Karl, what do you want to leave them with in addition to what they've heard today?
Go Air Force football. No, here's what I'll leave everybody with is there's always a way. There's always a way. There's always a way to figure out how to get out of the box. I actually, my team knows this, I actually pride myself at figuring something out. Because my perspective is there's always a way. There's always a way, and you're going to figure it out. Kind of like there's always a way out of that tunnel on the assault course, right? For me, even in the company, when I didn't know how to get out of a situation, or we felt like we made some mistakes and whatever, I was like, we'll figure it out. There's always a way. We'll figure it out.
If people want to learn more about BotDoc or get a hold of you, how can they do that?
So, so BotDoc, would just you can Google BotDoc or Google me, Karl Falk. If there's anybody listening that thinks they want to get into something, or they're doing something and they think they're doing it bad, I've done it bad, right? So those are the conversations I like to have. So definitely reach out. So I would say just submit something through our website and just reference Academy, and my team will know that that's important to me. So we'll make the connection.
Thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Long Blue Leadership. If you enjoyed this episode, we encourage you to subscribe, share it with your family and friends, and post it to your social channels. Long Blue Leadership is a production of the Long Blue Line Podcast Network and presented by the U.S. Air Force Academy Association and Foundation. The views and opinions of the guests and hosts do not necessarily reflect those of the United States Air Force Academy, Academy Association and Foundation, its staff, or management. The podcast drops every 2 weeks on Tuesday mornings. Subscribe to Long Blue Leadership on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn plus Alexa, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Search @Air Force Grads on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and more for show announcements and updates. And visit longblueleadership.org for past episodes and more Long Blue Line Podcast Network programming.